Well, it's beginning. We are starting to get news about the next Battlefield. This has been rumored for a while. I think they've even lightly acknowledged it themselves. But we got this big trailer, and I want to talk about it. So here in the background, you'll see a plan. I'm going to focus on the end of it. But basically, through this trailer, we find out that there's currently a handful of studios all working on this next Battlefield game. Um, it's not been named yet. We don't know if it's going to be called Battlefield 6 or 2040 something, or who knows. I'm gonna guess they're just gonna go with Battlefield 6 or some very simple name. I think bringing back the whole 2040 something. I love 2042. A lot of people don't, so they'll probably try to get away from that. We'll have to wait and see. I've even had some thought that they may just go with Battlefield. I don't, as kind of like a reboot to a point. So um, this will be the first game where they kind of put together this Battlefield development studio, or this idea, where Vince Zampella, formerly of Respawn, who's responsible for a ton of really awesome games, he's the head of this now, and he's not just the head of Dice or anything like that. He's the head of like Battlefield Studios, right? So that's Dice, that's Ripple Effect, that's EA Motive. Um, which is notable if you've been paying attention to EA and BioWare news lately. You know that a bunch of BioWare devs have left the BioWare studio, have been placed at EA Motive, at Ripple Effect, Criterion as well. I don't think BioWare devs are there, but that's the fourth studio. Um, and there was this weird vibe around it of like, oh man, they're stripping the BioWare team down. Well, it's not all that weird after the Veilguard came out, the Dragon Age game, for devs to get fired and for them just to lay off a bunch of people until they start their next project. For BioWare, that's Mass Effect. But instead of doing that, it seems like they've spread the love and sent those devs to other places, most of them without their consent, or at least they didn't know it was going to be permanent. Different story. Check out my other videos. I talk more about it. But here we have this interesting situation where now we have this big studio and these multiple studios who are doing co-dev on this game. And it really seems like they're making a big push to not make the mistakes they made with Battlefield 2042, a game that released in pretty rough shape. Within a few months, I thought they had gotten it into a really good spot, and I still love it. I have over 300 hours in it. I really like 2042, but that's obviously not the common thread. So this is a interesting video they did. It's really focused on Battlefield Labs, which is, it appears to basically be a big push for them to do a community testing experience here. So they've been supposedly been doing a ton of internal testing, and now they're opening it up to fans. We don't know how soon we're going to get access and all of that, but that's obviously what this is pushing. When I tried to sign up, I was in line. This was in a couple minutes of this. Behind it was like, I want to say 30,000 people. So there's interest at the very least, and we'll see how that goes. So this is a quick video, but I did want to wrap it up here at the end, where I'm actually going to show a very tiny bit of gameplay. I'm going to skip some of this trailer. Go watch the whole thing yourself if you want to see it all. And that's it so far, right? So it's not a ton. I don't want to overstate. Battlefield always has extremely good trailers. In fact, Battlefield 2042, I think, besides I think the music choice, has one of the best trailers ever, and it ended up being one of their worst performing games. So I do just want to go back and show this and kind of in at least in some capacity here, show what we're looking at and talk about it. So here we have, let me see if I can get a good shot. So a few things I like about this. The guns in 2042 are fine. The aesthetic of this is definitely Battlefield 3-4. That's an M1 Abrams tank, as far as I can tell. That is a modern current take. This game seems like it's going to be taking place in modern times. Where like 2042 has the M1A5 tank, which I believe the M1A2 is like the current upgrade of the Abrams tank, and they're even talking about like an Abrams X or whatever is going to be the new gen, where it's a whole new tank essentially. So where the 2042 had kind of a futuristic version of the Abrams, This just looks like a modern Abrams as far as I can tell. So if we're thinking about time frames and stuff like that for when this game may take place, there's that. I also want to direct you to just looking at the garb. It's hard for me to get a good shot of it. Um, in 2042, they had this operator system, the specialist system, which I hated, partially just because of the immersion breaking. It did where you would just see the same like handful of characters running around the map. You'd see like three of the same character, and even if they were in different cosmetics, it's still just whatever. Um, After the game came out, they really de-emphasized the personalities of each of these operators. When the game first came out, like every time you selected one of them in the menu, they would have this voice line and make a joke or whatever. And that's been de-emphasized almost entirely at this point. They are at a point now where it looks like they're going back to the old Battlefield way of things, where you're going to have loadouts, you're going to have maybe like specializations or something, medic, assault, things like that, the more classic Battlefield way of doing things. And you're going to have what I assume will be like randomly generated or kind of like random looking soldiers in regular soldier garb. Again, we're seeing a few things here in this little clip. There's stuff you start to see here on this part here. You see this destruction. There's a little bit of destruction BF 2042, mostly walls and things like that. As far as I can remember, there's not full destruction of buildings and things like that. Something to keep in mind, at least the rumors for the next game, is that they are getting rid of the 128 player games. That's what 2042 has. It's actually my preferred mode, so I'm going to be bummed that they're getting rid of that. But the problem with that is that the 64 and 32 and 128 player games share maps, and so all the maps are designed for 128, and then they get pared down for the lower servers. And when you have 128 players, that reduces the things that you can do with assets and destruction and things like that, even just graphical fidelity in general, which I will argue pretty heavily that BF 2042 on the day it came out and today is a beautiful game. It looks extremely good and it runs really well. Even on my Series X is where I play. I don't even play on PC. It runs very good on my Series X. Getting past that, them making the cap 64 players just means that the maps and stuff are just going to have more stuff. Even seeing here, you see these boxes of the food boxes flying around. You see that column getting destroyed, and we see more destruction shortly. It's just going to mean that the maps, they're going to be more dense. They're going to have more stuff, more destructibility, and so on. Again, if we're looking at weapons and equipment and stuff, we're seeing soldiers wearing normal army gear, modern military gear, and here we're seeing them. We're seeing a weapon that is a modern EOTech sight. This looks like just like an M4, some variant of it, and nothing too exotic here. Again, here, I don't think we're seeing anything unique here, but again, I'm reiterating here that we're seeing a bunch of people in more normal garb where the cosmetics and stuff in 2042 got fairly silly. That will probably happen eventually in this game. I do hope they go back to an old school way of at least making the stuff a little more grounded that they put in. But, these live service games, which this will be in some capacity, they do the microtransaction thing. That's how they keep the game going. It's how they make a bunch of money. Hopefully they keep it under control. There we see a little bit of a example of some of the destruction. We see a better example of it in a minute, but this is kind of what I'm getting at. Now, this is probably just cosmetic destruction. Who knows if we can go into that building or not? But it's still nice to see, and just the atmosphere, the immersion of it, that kind of stuff. When a rocket flies over you and misses, but blows up the facade of the building behind you and everything falls around you. It's pretty cool. And if it's like the old games, I believe if you're close enough to that stuff falling, it could kill you. And then here we have the soldier here. We actually see different types of camo on these two. We see on the right side a soldier with like a very minimal amount of like the ghillie suit looking stuff on their heads. If you see any of the footage from Ukraine, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this game's going to be the aesthetic and the visuals will be very, very, very inspired by the Ukraine war. Unfortunately, that's going on, but it's providing more useful footage for research than we've ever gotten in the history of the world. Is just the way it is. So that kind of camouflage I've seen used in that conflict. And then we have the soldier that we're in the perspective of loading up a RPG, and we'll see the results of that. And here, if you see, we have that whole facade of that building being affected and falling, and there were multiple soldiers in there standing at the bottom. What I found interesting is that it was very, it always looked good in the old games when they would do this stuff. BF3, I think, was the first one that emphasized this kind of destruction. As far as I can tell, this is way more destruction than what we saw in 2042 at any time. But what I actually find interesting is up here in the top left is seeing the building, the building beside it being affected as well. I just imagine with the higher horsepower of the modern consoles and stuff like that, they're going to be able to make these effects matter more. One thing I did want to point out after showing that is there, if you watch some of this footage watch the soldiers and the explosions happening around them. This is one more thing I noticed that was kind of cool. I'm assuming this is going to be something that as the player you may not notice as much, but watch some of these soldiers as there's explosions going off. Their character models are reacting to it. And so stuff like that, they're little details, but they're things that can just be really, really cool in the game. So it's a pretty minimal update, right? This isn't some big blowout of all the features and everything they're doing. They're obviously working towards that. I'm assuming this game's coming out this year. I imagine they'll do testing. I wouldn't be surprised if, late this week or next week, people start getting invites. Maybe they'll test it through summertime. And then I wouldn't be surprised at all if they announce a release date this fall or this winter. I'm down. This seems, I really like 2042, so maybe my standards are low. I don't know. I can't wait for this. This is really exciting. I've never been able to get into Warzone. Call of Duty, I can typically play for a little bit, but it's just too fast paced. I prefer this, especially the combined arms, the jets, the helicopters, the vehicles, all those things combined. My favorite thing in the world to do is to be like an anti-tank or anti-vehicle player. If you've seen any of my highlights, or if you go through my shorts on YouTube, you'll see that I, every now and then will post compilations of me taking out helicopters with RPGs and stuff. It's one of my favorite things to do, and it always has been. So I'm super pumped for this. I really hope I get an invite for this ASAP. I don't know what the NDA is going to look like and all that, so we'll see how much I can talk about it before they go public. But they'll do this labs thing. I'm sure they'll do beta testing that will be public, do like probably early access stuff and all that. And hopefully that leads to a game that has a much better result than the last one. Let me know what you think about this little trailer and the Battlefield Labs initiative they have here down in the comments. Let me know what your history is with the franchise. If you want more updates on Battlefield, more thoughts on it, updates on BioWare, EA, gaming news in general, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the like button so other people see this. And if you really, really want to support what I do, consider becoming a YouTube member. You get videos like this one early, and there's a bunch of other perks you can check out as well. If you want to check out all of my other content and ways to support what I do, check out the links in the show description. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.